Welcome back in, Cougar fans. The countdown of the greatest football players in BYU football history rolls on. It's the 100th season coming up this fall for BYU in 2024. We're looking at the 100 greatest players in BYU football history. And joining me on this edition of the show is Chris Hoke, great BYU defensive lineman from 1994 to 2000. He was part of those teams with LaVell Edwards, teammate of Kalani Sitake, a great BYU football defensive lineman. Chris, appreciate you joining me today.
Oh, man, it's great to be with you, brother.
You know, it's fun to look back at the history of BYU football, and I think oftentimes so many people overlook how many good defensive linemen have rolled through BYU over the years, and you're definitely one of those guys that embodies the talented stars that have rolled through here. I feel like it's just kind of a slept-on position that doesn't get enough praise over the years at BYU.
I think so, too. You know, there's been a lot of solid, high-quality defensive linemen, like you said, and you got to give a lot of credit to the late Tom Ramage, my D-line coach.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of great D-line coaches since, but Coach Ramage was second to none, and he did a great job in recruiting quality players and then taking them and helping them get to the next level in terms of their play. And so I have to give a lot of the credit to him for helping me develop and become the kind of player I did at BYU.
Was Coach Ramage the reason you did ultimately come to BYU from Santa Ana, California?
Well, listen, I grew up a BYU fan, right? I grew up. I was in 1984. I was down in San Diego. I know it's not called. What is it called now? It's I know they've changed the name of the stadium.
They changed it to Qualcomm. It was once Jack
Qualcomm.
Murphy.
Yeah, Jack Murphy. It was Jack Murphy. I was in that stadium when BYU won the national championship against Michigan, and so I grew up just bleeding blue and wanting to play for the Cougars. And, you know, it was tough, though. I mean, there was a time, you know, Utah was recruiting hard at one point, and they did a really good job of recruiting. But I knew where my heart was, and I had to be a Cougar. When
you were being recruited to BYU, did you have conversations or in-home visits with LaVell?
I did. LaVell came to I got a picture. I got to find it somewhere in my file cabinet, but I got a picture of Ken Schmidt and LaVell Edwards at my home my senior year when they came to bring, they had to bring in the closer, right? They had to bring in LaVell, and he came to the house, and it was awesome. He was a legend, right? And so when he walked in the house, it was like he left it different than it was when he walked in, and it was a special experience.
So when you did get to BYU, I believe it was that 1994 season, and then, if I'm not mistaken, you served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, played from 1997 to 2000. What was your first experience of BYU? Was it everything you had hoped for when you arrived on campus in Provo?
No, it was. Listen, it was everything that I had hoped for. It was more. You know, I came to BYU before my mission. It's a little different now, but I went for a year and then I left. How it was back then, because you couldn't go on your missions until you were 19. But I remember the first time, being there at training camp and going through the season. I redshirted the year before my mission. But I remember when LaVell asked me if to come along with the team to the Utah game. We played up at Utah that year, my freshman year. And I remember going up there and getting all the travel gear and suiting up for warm-ups. And it was a little different rules back then for redshirt freshmen. And it was just amazing. You know, I remember still staying in Little America. I remember just the little details. And that's where really, for me, it was I got to work as hard as I can. I got to give everything I got. Man, I want to be a part of this every single week. That's what I want to do. And I was hungry for 2 years of my mission to get back and get back in that travel squad. And it was everything. It was everything. The whole experience was amazing.
Do you feel like that work ethic was what kind of defined your BYU career?
I think it defines my career at BYU and in the NFL, right? I mean, listen, I recognize the fact that I'm not the biggest, strongest, fastest guy. I wasn't. That's a fact. If we look at the measurables, but what I felt that I really would define me were the immeasurables, right? And those things, they're the intangibles, and it was work ethic. And I knew that I was at a disadvantage athletically and physically. And so I had to outwork everybody else to make the team, to be able to contribute, and to stay on the team. And so that's what's defined me throughout my life.
What's some of your favorite memories in game beyond that 94 visit to Utah on the travel roster? What were some other key memories that always stick with you during your time at BYU?
Well, listen, I think, there's a lot of one that stands out to me the most is that last game of Coach Edwards at home when they named the stadium after Coach Edwards. I mean, my last year at BYU was LaVell's last year. And so it was an awesome that game and to be able to win that game and to be able to have President Hinckley there and go through that whole experience was one that I think of all the things that stands out. I know it's not a football experience, if you will, but it was part of being part of the football team and having that experience was just incredible. I would say a lot of the games against Utah, I just remember being down and Brandon Doman driving the ball down the field and us winning that game. That was a huge game because whenever you played Utah, I was 2-2 against Utah. And that was one that I don't think many people outside of our sidelines thought we were going to win that game.
And those Utah games too were amazing wins. The Kaneshiro doink in 1998, where I think McBride is like turning around. He thinks he made it, and he realizes he missed it. And then of course 2000 up in Salt Lake, LaVell's final game.
Yep.
Well, it's funny when they were talking to players that played for LaVell, they all felt like LaVell viewed them as their favorite. Was that the case with you and your relationship with LaVell back then? Well,
that's just how he treated you. He treated you like you were his son, right? And you loved that about him. And you're right. I mean, he treated you like you were the most important person and that you were his favorite. And I think playing for LaVell really helped me to become a better person, to see the kind of person I want to be. When you came in there, not only did you become a better football player, playing for LaVell and the coaching staff he put together, but you really left there a better man because of his example and who he was.
Who were some of the players that you had strong relationships with on those teams when you played from 97 to 2000?
Well, obviously, Hans Olsen has been one of my great friends for a long time. We played together. Got plenty of stories about him, but just a tremendous man and a great friend. But I usually hang around with the guys that play the position you played, right? So, I was good friends with Satemanali and good friends with Ryan Denny and good friends with Byron Frisch and all those guys. But Justin Anna was a good buddy. Linebacker coach now at BYU. He played middle linebacker. He was a year behind me. And across the board, the thing that's great about football is, and I see this particularly with the Steelers now, is even though all of us come from different backgrounds, all of us come from different walks of life, when we come together, maybe at that time we're all kind of in different places, but years later as you come together, it's a feeling of brotherhood, right? And it's a feeling, maybe somebody was in a different place during that time, they're in a different situation, working through different things. But now, as you look back on it and you gather together for events, you gather together for reunions, it's like you're a brother and like you were one the whole time. Pretty cool.
Do you get that sense too with the BYU brotherhood? Is that still strong today, you feel?
There's no question. There's no question about it, right? I mean, and that's how it is. When I go out to Utah, I'm out there often and see guys I played with. I was out there just a few weeks ago and ran to a buddy that I hadn't seen in a long time, a guy that I played with, and I probably hadn't talked to him in 15 years. But it's like we were still teammates, right? We're still brothers, and that's what it's all about. It's really cool. And you think back to some of those games and seasons that you were part of, and man, there were some really good BYU teams during that stretch. Yet, what do you feel were some of your favorite wins beyond the Utah games? 'Cause I think back to like that Washington game in '99. That was a really good Washington team, and you guys went to Alabama in 1998. Went up against Sean Alexander. There were some good games. We got beat down there. We played Florida State. We had a game out in Florida State, and they were coming off a national championship and playing against Chris Wanke, who had come off winning the Heisman Trophy. And there were some fun games. We went to Virginia. Remember, we beat Virginia. That's right. On that crazy game with Thomas Jones. I mean, he was an amazing running back. And then we go up to Syracuse and get crushed by Dwight Freeney. And I think was Donovan. I don't know if Donovan was on the team, but Dwight Freeney was on that Syracuse team. So we played some great teams, and I love going out east where I'm at now. But I remember that Virginia game was big when we beat Virginia. They had a huge offensive line. Thomas Jones was just a top running back in college football at the time. That was a big win that I saw.
Yeah, that was. And I remember Pochman made, I believe, the field goal late. And then it was their debut at Virginia, that new stadium. And they had Welch and LaVell. It was just, that was a really big game. I'm curious, too, Chris, how do you feel like BYU at that time? Like, I don't feel like there's enough credit given now as time has gone by of how much, in a way, I feel like there was so much of an NFL factory from BYU in LaVell's time. Like, LaVell had so much clout in the football world where coaches would descend on Provo and study the way that not only he coached offense and defense, but just over his role in football. How much preparation you feel like you gained from being at BYU to go into the NFL?
Well, listen, like I said, I give a lot of credit to Coach Ramage and how he coached me and what kind of person he was, but I'll tell you what, a lot of it comes down to the kind of guys they recruited, right? They recruited tough football players. They recruited guys that were physical guys. That's the kind of guys they recruited. You think about some of the guys from the farms and that they recruited. I came from South California, so I wasn't from the farm areas, but a lot of these guys that just worked on the farms, and they came to BYU and they were tough people. Tough football players, and I think that's what NFL is looking for, guys that are tough, right? Of course, you got to have some of the things that they value, speed and size. But man, if you can hit somebody, and if you like doing it, and you're coachable, you're going to find a place on an NFL squad. And that's the reason why I think that BYU typically had a lot of guys. If you look at my time there at BYU, the defensive line, me, Hance. Satema was on the practice squad for the New England Patriots for a couple games. You had Ryan Denny was a top draft pick. You had Brett Kiesel. Brett Kiesel was a draft pick who played in the NFL for 12, 13 years. You had Byron Frisch. Those are all guys that I played with that went to the NFL and had decent careers in the NFL. It's because they're tough, and they did a good job of recognizing guys that were physical, guys that just wanted to go out and play football, and that's why you saw them being able to play the next level. Sometimes coaches get enamored with the size and the speed, but their heart's the size of a peanut.
Yeah. Right?
And NFL coaches, I played in the NFL for 11 years. I'm still around a lot of the NFL coaches. I know them well. They don't want guys that have the heart the size of a peanut. They want a guy to have the heart the size of a grapefruit or even a watermelon. Right, that's what they're looking for, and sometimes you go out and you kind of get all enamored with a player who has size and speed, but their heart's small, and that's where you struggle.
Well, that it feels like that embodies BYU football. Period. I mean, the effort, the passion is always what kind of has carried BYU to heights that. That surprised maybe the nation. It doesn't surprise people that were in the building when you were there, but
Sure.
It's Chris. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate you spending some time to kind of reflect on your time at BYU, and hope that we hope we can cross paths again, and looking forward to maybe catching up down the road in the future.
Man, I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor, and even to be in the same breath with some of these greats at BYU.
Appreciate it. That's Chris Hoke, the great Chris Hoke, here on KSL.